If you fancy seeing a device where the manufacturer has listened to customer feedback and actually made changes that mean something, you need to watch this video. I was a big fan of the original Google Pixel Fold. It wasn't perfect. For instance, if you opened it up, it doesn't open completely flat, which really bothers some people. Also, the bezels are pretty thick on that internal display. The software experience wasn't as good as Samsung because there were certain apps that didn't make the best use of that display. And the multitasking, again, wasn't quite the same as what you get on Samsung. None of that stuff bothered me because of that front display. We now have a new one. It's got a new name as well. So it's the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold, which is a bit of a mouthful. I'd rather they just called it the Google Pixel Fold 2. But regardless, that's just a marketing thing. Who cares? The good thing about this phone is that clearly Google listened to the stuff that people weren't keen on with this. It has also retained something which other foldables I've reviewed recently don't have, and which for me make this my foldable of choice. Now, this is a first impressions video. I will be doing a comparison between this, the Fold 6 from Samsung, and the Magic V3 from Honor, and maybe one other, we'll see. That's coming at some point, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell. But in this video, let's get into what makes this a great phone. But first, just a very quick word from today's sponsor, which is RoboForm, and that is basically a password manager. If you're not using a password manager on your phone, on your laptop, on your tablet, you need to be. And the great thing about RoboForm is that it goes across all of those different platforms. It even goes across platforms. So if you have an iPhone and you have an Android tablet, or you have a Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold and an iPad, for instance, you can use RoboForm across both of them. And a password manager is basically something in which you can store your login details, your secret notes, basically anything digital that you don't want people to get their greasy mitts on and do bad things with. Stick them into RoboForm. And yes, RoboForm has a no breach history. It's so easy to use as well. There's a one-click login feature where you choose the website or the web app that you want to log into in RoboForm, and bang, you're in. You can share login details with friends and family and colleagues as well, very securely, and there's an emergency access feature, so if the worst happens and for whatever reason you can't get into your stuff, you'll have someone that you've designated as your emergency contact who can get into RoboForm and get that stuff for you. They also have 24/7 support, which is very, very reassuring, although I've never had to use it myself. This thing is rock solid. The most important thing, apart from the no breach history and the ease of use and all that sort of stuff, is the fact that I've managed to get just an incredible deal for you guys. So if you do need a password manager, either perhaps you've never used one and you've suddenly realized that you need it, or the one that you're using you're not sure about and perhaps there's been a breach or two, the deal that I've got for RoboForm is incredible. Just click that link in the description and enjoy. Right, let's talk specs and pricing. So inside here we have the Google Tensor 4 chip, 16 gig of RAM, and two choices for storage. So either 256 gig or 512 gig. The Actua cover display is 160 millimeters and it has a peak brightness of 2700 nits. And the internal display, which is called the Super Actua Flex display, is 204 millimeters and also has a peak brightness of 2700 nits. The battery is 4650 milliamp hours and it has fast charging and wireless charging. The cover screen is covered by Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2 and the rear is a silky matte black with a satin metal frame. Yes, I have just read that from the spec sheet. It's got IPX8 water resistance and a durable steel hinge with a polished finish, which once again I've just read from the spec sheet. The 256 gig version in the UK is £1,749 and $1,799 in the US. The 512 gig version is £1,869 in the UK and $1,919 in the US. So again, it's a very expensive phone. So what do you get for that money? I think we should start with the obvious comparison, which is between the original Pixel Fold and the new one. And the first thing you can see is that the new Pixel 9 Pro Fold is a much, much taller device. That's the new one, that's the old one. They couldn't look any more different. And that is immediately an exciting thing because we've gone one generation on and clearly Google has made some serious changes. This one just feels more refined. It's not much thinner actually, it's just thinner. It also doesn't have the polished sides which look nice, but this matte finish looks smarter and more modern. The most important thing, however, is that the camera housing, which scratched immediately as soon as he got it out of the box, isn't on this one. So they've gone for this, again, this kind of far more matte finish, which thus far hasn't scratched. And bearing in mind I'm wearing this Ultra Human ring, which scratches everything, that's impressive. The other thing, this opens pretty much completely flat. In fact, I think it is flat. That isn't. So again, the comparison between the two, Google has done a lot of work on the hinge. Same thing with the crease. It's still there, obviously, because it's a foldable phone, but it's much less noticeable. If I run my fingernail across both of them, you can feel it much less, and you can see it much less on here. I mean, if I do that with this great big key light, you're probably going to, well, you are going to see it. The internal display is much bigger, so that's the original Google Pixel Fold, and that's the new one. It's huge. As for the external display, it is, as I mentioned, a lot taller. It's slightly narrower as well, and for that reason, it's pretty much perfect. Yes, I like the one-handedness of the Z Fold 6. You can still use this one-handed, but more importantly, you can do more with it. You can get so much done on that front display, and because the internal display now opens completely flat and has smaller bezels, you still want to use it. You still want to dive in and use that big display. The only thing to mention is that one thing they have done is they've moved the camera, the internal selfie camera, which was in the bezel on the original one, onto the screen. So we now have a little kind of pinhole, a little pinhole camera there. Does that matter? No. The displays are much brighter as well. 2700 nits peak brightness on both of them on here. I think on this it was 1550 on the cover and 1450 on the internal. So much brighter displays. More RAM. So this had 12 gig. This has got 16 gig. Tensor 2 chip, Tensor 4 chip, G2 chip, G4 chip. Those selfie cameras have had an upgrade, but the rest of the camera system is pretty much the same. I'll get onto that a bit later in this video. But in terms of an upgrade from this to this, Gen 1 to Gen 2, it's huge. Let's talk design and display, and I think as soon as you get this thing out of the box, you feel like you've spent a lot of money, and that was the case actually with the original one as well. Even though, yes, it has that unfortunately very scratchable camera housing, it did feel like a very expensive device, and that's very important with foldables. I love the design. It's classic Google, very simple branding. They've changed the design of the camera housing. I like this very much. Overall, it's just lovely. Two different colors. This is the obsidian version. There's a porcelain version as well, which is basically white. The other thing to mention about the design is that Google has kept this kind of, I'm not sure what you call it, but there's a slightly bigger bezel on the front display near the hinge, which makes it look like a Google Pixel Fold. It just sets it apart from the other foldables, which from the front, a lot of them look quite similar. I think that's a very smart design. The crease, as mentioned, is there because of course it is. In terms of where it sits amongst the competition, it's not quite as good as the Honor Magic V3, which is barely perceptible really, but it is better slightly than the Samsung Z Fold 6. One design quirk that has always bothered me slightly with Google Pixels is the fact that the power button is above the volume rocker. Does that matter? Not really, unless you change phones all the time like I do. That's not really fair to mark it down on that, but it's just one of those things where I tend to hit the volume button rather than the power button when turning it on. Not a big deal. On that note, we do have obviously fingerprint recognition on the power button that works very well, and facial recognition, which again is very good. Let's talk about performance, and this is fast becoming a moot point in my reviews because I don't do benchmarks. I don't care about those numbers. I don't do any kind of gaming really on my phones. I don't do anything that pushes them, and I'd love to know if you do that, and I'd love to know what you do. If, like me, you just use these phones normally, for texting people, for social media, for taking photos, all the normal stuff, they all feel the same no matter what you spend, and that's a good thing. It means that power is democratized, and you don't have to spend a fortune to get a very good performing phone. But it also means at the top end of the scale, where you're spending a lot of money on a phone, these phones feel the same as a phone that costs half the price. I'm not sure what to make of that, but it does make these parts of the video very straightforward. This feels incredibly quick in everyday use. You'll have no problems with it whatsoever. In terms of the operating system, this is the most unfettered version of Android you will find, and as a result of that, it's a joy to use. I love Android on Pixel phones. It just feels so unhindered and so unbloated and all that sort of stuff. So the only thing to bear in mind with it is that you can't do quite as many things with multitasking as you can on, let's say, the Magic V3 or the Z Fold 6. You can have two apps running side by side and it works very well. You can resize them and do all that sort of stuff. You can't have floating windows or 3 apps running at once or 4 apps running at once. If that's your kind of use case, you might find the Pixel 9 Pro Fold a little bit restrictive, possibly. For me, I think they've got it just right because I don't want floating windows, and I've tried all that stuff on other foldables and it's very impressive, but it's still quite a small display. In terms of battery life, Google quotes 24 plus hours of usage, I guess in fairly moderate use cases, and it does that. This lasts beyond a day. The one thing to remember with foldable phones is that you're not going to get 2 days of battery life out of them. That's very tricky to achieve. If you were really cautious with your usage and if you put the battery saving mode on and that sort of stuff, you probably would. But if you use it fairly consistently throughout the day, because it's powering 2 screens, we have to remember that. You've got a display there and a great big display inside. That's going to use up more battery life. So don't expect Pixel 9 Pro XL levels of battery because you won't get that. But it's still perfectly good for what this phone is. Onto the camera system, we have a 48 megapixel quad wide camera, that's the main one, a 10.5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 10.8 megapixel telephoto. And the first thing to say is that we have a 5x optical zoom on here, which immediately makes it my favorite foldable on the market that I've tried. I know there's others and we are going to be getting those in, but this versus the Magic V3 and the Z Fold 6, this wins because of that 5x optical zoom. It just means that this phone has a flagship camera system, which it should have given the price. Equally, it has the Pixel camera system, which for me is the best one on the market. This is massively subjective. I always have to say that at this point of these reviews, because what I like, you may not like, and vice versa. So the photos that I'm showing you right now that have come from this camera, and they're completely straight out of the camera, no tweaking whatsoever. You may not like them. Equally, you may like them, and I'd love to know what you think in the comments. But for me, there's just something about pixel photography. There's enough drama. Yes, they are processed, and for some people they're a bit too sharp and that kind of thing, but I just love the photos this thing spits out. And that 5x is just so usable, whether you're taking portraits or just trying to get a bit closer to something, or just adding a bit of, again, drama and compression to make the image more interesting. When it comes to video, one of the best things about the Google Pixel Fold is that I can use the front display as a monitor and still benefit from the main camera system. So I can use it as a selfie cam, but get the best possible image quality. It shoots 4K, which is what this is. I'm not using Video Boost here, which is this thing where you can basically have the video sent to Google's servers on the internet, and they do some very clever stuff to it and send it back down to your phone in a higher quality. You can do that. This isn't. This is the standard 24 frames per second 4K video. It doesn't shoot 8K. The Pixel 9 Pro XL, you can do that technically on that phone. The only thing I'd say with that is that it's not true 8K, because it shoots 4K, sends it to Video Boost, and that upscales it, as far as I can tell, to 8K. So it's not doing it natively on the device. You don't get that on here. Does that matter? Again, I don't think it does. How many people shoot 8K on their phone? Not that many. But this video quality, well, let me know what you think in the comments. This is the audio as well. So let's go from this mic to the mic on here. This is the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold mic quality. Again, let me know what you think in the comments, guys. This is what it's like. And now it's time for, oh no, there is one other thing about the camera. I think parents will love this. If you've got a kid and they never look at the camera when you're trying to take a photo, it happens all the time. My 2-year-old son is far more interested in what's going on over there or behind him or whatever. Google has done this thing where if you want to take a photo of your kid and they are doing that thing where they're looking all over the place, there's an option called Made You Look. And if I press that, it puts this cute thing on. What is it? It said, is that a chicken? You can change it. So we've got some different characters. There's a fish. There's this guy. There's this dude. And basically that makes your kid look at the screen, which means when you take a photo, you've got them. How cute is that? Anyway, on to my conclusion. I've not gone into any of the AI features in this review because everyone else has done that. If you want to see those in action, then there's loads. In fact, you've probably seen that already. Things like Add Me, where you can take a photo and then have yourself inserted into that group, is very handy, I think, in certain situations. But for me, I want to know what this is like as a phone, just as a regular phone. The one AI feature which makes this a brilliant phone is Gemini. So this has Gemini built into it, which is laughably ahead of Siri at the moment until, well, who knows? Apple Intelligence is on the way. Maybe that will match Gemini. We'll see. But for the time being, Gemini is just fantastic. It's like a mixture of ChatGPT and Google Assistant. It's just brilliant. So that's fantastic. But in terms of just a phone, having this as your phone, your main device, it's brilliant. It may not be the best foldable out there. It's not the thinnest. It's not the most capable when it comes to multitasking and that sort of stuff. The camera system is completely subjective. You may prefer what Samsung spits out in terms of photos, or OnePlus or Honor. I have no idea. But for me, it's almost the perfect package. I say almost because it's very expensive and it's a foldable, and that's not for everyone. But if you want a foldable that's enjoyable to use, easy to live with, feels very, very expensive, and takes amazing photos, this is impossible not to recommend. For me, the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold is still the most likable foldable on the market, and what more do you need? If you've enjoyed this video, guys, give it a thumbs up, that always helps, and if you've still got some time, keep watching for a link to my Google Pixel 9 Pro XL review.